Okay. So I'm going to do this just a little different way. I'm going to write functions to pass through like our map, reduce, and filter. Maybe I kind of just want to show you a different way. Maybe you'll fill in some of the gaps or some of the places where maybe you're confused. But let's just go through these. And like I said, I'm going to go a little quick. So we have, we're going to be working with like a very specific type of data. It's going to be like a food object. And we can think of a food object as being something like this. So I'm just making a mental note. When I'm talking about a food object, it's something that has, it's an object, a JavaScript object that has the key ID, which is going to be a number, the key name, which is going to be a string, and then the price, which is going to be a number. So that's, when I say food object, that's what it is. That's like the data structure. So I could have different arrays of food objects, you know, Mexican food, I could have American food. But the point is they need to have arrays of objects that have the ID, name, and price. Cool. So now that I have that in my head, I kind of just have that memorized. I'm going to go through these. So I want to write a function that returns that takes one of these array of food objects and returns a formatted string. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do a function. I'll just call this food to string. I'm going to write a function right here that takes a food object and just converts it to a string. This returns and then yeah, this was just kind of do whatever. So let's do let's interpolate name, you know, is price and is ID. Because those are the things in my food. So if I do a console.log food to string, pass it a food, let's just grab this one. Node demo.js. Update one's already been defined. Oops, sorry about that. You probably got that error. So let's just change that name. So I can't have two consts with the same name. Okay.
I think update food one just got copied and pasted again. Yeah. So I think there's an update. Cool. An extra one on there.
Well, if yours, I mean, either way, I just switched that to update food too. So now I have two different ones, but now I'm getting an error. So I'm getting, you know, name is not defined. I get price is undefined because this function takes this food to string, takes a food object, and then I'm using like these name, price, and ID. These are not defined. I need to grab those off of my food object. My food has a name, it has a price, and it has an ID. Burger is 21, maybe I want a $sign there. And the space there. Cool. So now I have a function that takes one food object and formats the string. Don't really need to log that anymore. So now I can do my about. So my about takes an array of foods and should return an array of formatted strings. So I can do my foods.map. I need to pass it a function So normally what I'm having you do is just write the anonymous function right there. That's what I'm doing, but this time I'm just going to name it and pass it directly. And then I just need to return this. Then we can do like a console.log.
It's kind of backwards from how we've been doing it so far, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really,
It like looks a little cleaner though.
yeah, I would say it's, if I'm not going to reuse this food to string function, it's not cleaner. But once again, if this is easier for you, do it. Clean code is that's me being very, very picky. Like, yeah, if this makes more sense to you, do it this way for sure. So let's do this. Like, I'm just going to do a message like about return, and then just, and then let's pass it like Mexican. There we go. Carnitas is 21 and ID is 1. Asada is 22 and ID is 2. So yeah, I could write this function and store it to a variable, or, you know, do something, or do like an ES, just do the function syntax. Function, wait, sorry, I didn't want to delete that. That works too. Or yeah, or I could just take this anonymous function that's not named and pass it to my map function. They're both functions. The only difference is one I'm storing to the variable, the other is anonymous. So and this, I think it's showing it this way. Maybe that does. Seeing it a different way, maybe that starts to make some things click. I'm just passing my map function, a function that does the one, like a thing for one of the items. Cool. So let's do this one. So it's add food. So, and I was trying to show here, like, these are what the parameters look like. So the param foods, this should be an array of my food objects. Food should be a food object. And this add food returns a new array with the food added. Sorry. Okay. So this one's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to return. I'm going to spread out over my foods. And food. Let's copy this this log. It's going to be add food one return. So this one, the add food one return, I need to pass it foods, but then I actually need to pass it a food object. So I'll just hard code one in here. ID 3, price, and name the and there's my food added. And the order, the fact that these order doesn't matter in objects, the orders of the keys, it doesn't matter. The order of things in an array does matter. So you can think of objects as unordered and arrays as ordered. There's that one. So next we have this, just a little variation of this add food where I want to add a food. The only difference is how the signature is. So this one takes, instead of taking a food object, it takes ID, name, and price. So I'm going to spread out over the food, ID, name, and price. So spread out over the food, and then I just use my params to build out that food object. And so when I call this one, it's going to look very similar, except I'm not going to pass it a object. I'm just going to pass it those params. So it's not ID. It's just going to be 3, 20, and tacos. All right, is that not working? Add food to return at, I've called the wrong method. So let's just look at this, see if we can see what's going on here. So I accidentally called add food 1. So it's Mexican 3, 20, and tacos. And so now I'm getting this return where I have my 2 previous objects in my array, but then I have 3. Why am I getting a 3 on this new array?
What is the add food one? Like, where is it and what is it doing?
Here's the add food. It's add food 1's just what we did. It's right here.
Oh, okay.
This is just treating 3 like it's a new object or a new food.
Yeah, I mean, when I say food right here, notice how I hover over it, like the type of this food.
Yeah.
It can be any. So, yeah.
But it doesn't really know what else to return. So
yeah, well, it's doing
the second.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. It's the second thing. So I take that foods array, I take the 3, I copy my foods object, and then I put 3 at the end. And that, that works. That's like valid. JavaScript's like, cool, I can do that. But I don't want that to do that. So I want to have it call my add to, which knows how to handle all of these params. Cool. So there's 2 examples of add, just kind of a little different method signature. So that's something you'll hear that term, method signature. It's like like when I say what params do my method take, that's like the method signature.
So the second one, when you put it in, the order does matter, since it named it as the name was 20 and the price is tacos on that last one.
Yes, the order definitely matters, because if I do like, tacos here and the ID here, and I run this, well, now my ID is going to be tacos, and the price would be, those are all reversed. So I need to, when I call the function, my arguments need to match the order of my method signature. So it's foods first, then it's ID, then it's the name of the food, and then it's the price. Okay, so let's do this one. Let's do a map. So we're going to take a foods, an ID, and a price. So this should map through the array. When it finds the food with this ID that was passed, it should update that food with the price that was given. So let's write this function first. I'm just going to call this update food price. So I expect this to take a food, an ID, and the price. This one, let me think how to do this one. I'm gonna be a little confused. Okay, let's just do it anyway. So what I could say, like, if food dot ID equals the ID, then I could return, well, what I want to do, I just want to update the price and I don't want to mutate anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of the values of that food object that was passed. But I want to update the price. And I'm going to use whatever was passed. And then this one, I also just want this, if it's not the right ID, I want this to return just the food. So I want it unchanged. You know, if IDs don't match, just return the food, leave it unchanged. So let's just do a console.log. You know, update food price. Let's give it my Mexican. Now, once again, the order matters. So let's say I want to take ID 1 and update it to 100. Can I show this? Oh, let's just try this. It's kind of hard to show this return of food where the ID, well, let's just give it an ID. Like, I know I don't have like the ID 100 in here. Oh, wait, sorry. Let's do this. This one is definitely, I'm just going to hard code a food in here. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have an ID of 1, has a name of, you know, I don't know, fish, price. Because this method doesn't take an array, it just takes one food object. So I'm just going to hard code one in here. So this is an example where they do match. Let's give it an example where they don't match. Because here the ID, you know, 0, the name is, I don't know, pizza. So the pizza should not change because the ID is 10. And this is 99, got a lot of 1s and 0s. The ID is 99 and this ID is 0. So those don't match. So this one shouldn't update. This one should. So let's run this. Cool. So my fish is updating. There's ID 1, name fish, price is 100. So everything else is unchanged. But this one, it's ID 0, pizza, price is 10. That one's not changed because the IDs don't match. All right, so let's write this as a map. So I'm going to take my foods and I'm going to map it. I need to pass this the update food price function because this is the thing that's either going to return the updated food or just the food as is. And this is, and let's just return this. And let's look at the log of this. Okay, so now if I call this update food 1 return, I do this. So here I'm going to update the Mexican list. I want to grab the ID of 1 and I want to update that to the price 200. Let's see what we get here. So these do not, this isn't changing. I know this function works, right? I tested this function, it works. But let's do this. Maybe this might help a little to throw on some logs. It's kind of like experiment. What's going on here? I'm going to log my food. I'm going to log my ID. I'm going to log my price. So the ID is 0, the price is 0, and the food is there. The ID is 1, the price is 1, and the food is there. It actually looks like that is good, right? Hmm.
Do you have to return the update food price after you return just the food?
You mean like this?
Oh, I didn't even see that you had another one under.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what's going on here.
Is it the
think you did
price
price,
not
yeah.
equal to ID?
You return, or you did,
Price to ID.
Sorry, I price.id. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do price. There we go. I see what you're saying. Oh, interesting. Okay, I see what's going on here. Okay, so yeah, oh, all right, I totally see what's going on. It seemed like it was working. Yeah, and now that I have that price there, I was like, so I was very confused for a second there. Okay. So I have my food, right? That is my food, correct? When I'm logging food. And is that my ID though?
I mean, it's the ID in the array, isn't it?
Is it? Is that the ID of my food? Because that's what this function is expecting, the ID of the food. I have and it's supposed to be a number. So this is a number, but it's 0. What's the ID of my food?
1.
1.
So does it give? I thought it was giving you the like array index number.
Yes, that's what it's giving me.
Okay, cool.
And let me just add one here so this makes more sense. So let's add an ID with 99. So yeah, my ID is 0. Here it's 1, it's 2, but notice like the ID is like 1, 2, and then this one's 99. Yeah, this ID is really what it is it's the index of my array. And then the price is the array. That so the price is the actual array of things I'm iterating over. So like, what the hell is going on there? All right, well, let's do this. Let's go look at the map function JS. Let's look at the syntax, the signature. So I can pass the map function, a function who has the first parameter is going to be the element. So that's the thing in the array. I can pass it also a function that has the element, but then also it will allow me to pass it something that has the index. So if I want to use the index, I can use it. And then I can also pass it a function whose third thing is going to be the array itself. So this is how, like, this is what map is saying, hey, you can give me these 3 arguments, and I'll treat the first one as the element, I'll treat the second one as the index, and I'll treat the third one as the array. So I wrote a function called update food price that has 3 parameters: the food, the ID, and the price. Now, just because I called these food, ID, and price, when I pass those to the map function, the map function is going to treat this, you know, if we look at their signature, it's really going to treat this, you know, as, and I'll just comment this up above, the element, the index, and the array. So food is the element. So that one's named correctly. ID is actually going to be the index, like what current index am I iterating over? And the third thing, price, is actually just going to be the foods array.
So would it be better to just use like a filter function instead of a map?
No, I mean, because we don't want filter's not going to work, because filter I'm not going to update with filter. Like this one, I want to update the price of one of my objects. So filter wouldn't work because I can't change anything with filter. I can only remove things.
It worked for me somehow.
Yeah, I guarantee it doesn't work without you doing maybe a filter and then like an add at the end or something. Like filter by itself will not work. You might be doing an extra step or something.
Yeah, I think it might be.
You could, yeah, you could filter the ID out and then re-add the food with the updated price. But yeah, let's stick with map. But so what I'm doing, it's the same thing where I would, you know, if I had a add function, you know, that wanted, when I define the function add, if I say const add num1, num2, and then someone calls my function add, and you know, they pass it, you know, a sign that's like, oh, I want to add, you know, 1 and 1. So my method signature is, hey, you need to pass me a function whose first parameter is a number and the second one is also a number. And if they come in here and say like, oh, I want to use your add function and then pass it a sign and then 2 numbers, it's like, well, it's not going to work the way you're expecting it. So we're passing the map function, our function we created. That is not how the map function wants it to be. So we're not following their syntax. And so it's not going to work. So how do we get our function to work in here? Well, we can follow this one where we pass it a callback function. Let's do this. Let's pass it a callback function. Let's just call this X. So here's my callback function. I'm going to give it X. I'm going to give it the ID and price. Now it works. Now the food, which I called X, see, X is now, I'm passing it a function. Let me show you this, const wrap. This is kind of what I'm doing, wrap update. Because what I want to do is I want to wrap this update food function. Because I want this to take a function. This takes a callback. Oh my gosh, let's see if this is going to be cleaner. No, I'm just going to leave it like this. Let's just leave it like this. That's going to be confusing. This is already pretty confusing. So I'm passing my map a function. Let me just, okay, let's do this. Let's do, how could I do this? Wrap. I just kind of like, this is why maybe the anonymous functions are getting cleaner. If you can kind of see, like, let's see if we can show this example. Wrap, update food. I want this to take a food. And this is going to call my, there's not a way I can write this as one line. So yeah, no, that's just going to make it more confusing. Okay. Let's leave it like this. I was trying to wrap it so I could just pass a function without having to pass any of these parameters, but I'm not going to be able to do it. So let's look at what's going on here. So now I'm passing my map function a callback, right? What is X? In this case?
Food? Is
Yeah,
it-
X is the food. So that's why I can give it a function who takes a food and then calls this update food price. So I can pass it now that food, but now this ID is the actual ID and the price is the price from here. So when I run this, it now actually works. So I don't know what one seems cleaner to you, to do it like this, or to take this function and say return. I need to throw this in my foods.map. Foods.map. Pass it that function. Well, now I no longer need the ID and food because they're defined right there. I can just pass it the food. I have syntax there somewhere. This is just I mean, yeah, obviously this is just JavaScript, but I don't know which one seems more. These are really doing the same thing. Like here, I'm just passing, or they're doing, here I'm doing a map where that, the food is the food object, so I can compare the ID there, and copy the food and change the price, and just return the food if it's not the same. Or I could write this in a new function, that takes a food, but this one now needs to have the ID and the price because I need that for my logic. So I have to pass the ID and price from update food 1 to this function. Well, and then if I do that, I need to wrap the callback function to my map, in a callback function, or X, and then I could call this food. That's obviously the better name. Is that one a little mind bending?
Yeah, I'm kind of glad to see it was though, because I was getting so frustrated that I couldn't make it work. So I'm like, it's kind of a relief to know that it even tricked you a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
This
I
is
would,
the one. This is the one I had issues with last night, right? I think it was.
yeah.
I made it up.
Yeah, I would not, when I write these functions, I would not like write them like this unless I'm reusing this function. So a lot of the time, I'm more used to writing these as anonymous functions.
That's a lot more what mine looks like right there.
Like this up here.
No, the one that you have commented out.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would expect. But showing you different ways.
That's in Slack now for anybody who wants to look at it.
So let's do another one. And this one I'm just going to do as an anonymous function. So update food too. So this should take the ID and return the food. So this is going to, so once again, this is my method signature. Like this is when I look, when I'm looking at like something in like the docs, they're like, hey, this is how you use this function. And if you don't use it the way that they tell you to use it, you can't really expect it to work. So here's my method signature. I want foods to be an array of foods. I want ID to be the number, and I want food to be this object. And then I want to go through each item and update the food with the ID given. So this is do the same thing. We'll do a foods map. Go through food. If food.id equals ID, let's return food. Let's food. Okay. This one's kind of fun. This is getting all mixed up with names, but this will also be a good example because this is going to break or not. It's not going to work. Okay, so for this one, to follow the method signature, I pass it an array of foods. I give it an ID, and then I need to give it a full food object. So I'll just say like ID1, name is changed. Sure, I could like update the ID too, whatever, that doesn't have to remain the same. And then the price. Cool. So this one, there's going to be a couple issues with this. Let's just go through it one by one. First issue, update food to return is undefined. What do I need to do? Here's my call. I'm trying to log. This thing is coming back undefined.
You have to return your map.
Yeah, so I'll return my map. There's the first problem. The second problem is, Mexican, I'm updating one. It's not updating the food. Well, I have a little bit of a conflict, right? Or because I'm doing foods.map food, and then I also have this food param. If you can see, this one's actually grayed out. So this food is referring to the function I'm passing my map. So these two food are not the same. We need to call this. So in here, I might call this food, or I could call this like element, whatever. Let's call this food element. I would just need a different name. Do I want the food element here or do I want it there?
You want it on the bottom one.
Yes. Because the food, like if the IDs match, then I want to return the food that was passed to this function, i.e. this thing. If they don't match, then I just want to return the thing I was iterating over. Run this. That updates that first one with the ID of 1 to 12 changed and price.
So instead of return food in mine, I had it return a spread over X, and then I did a comma and then the word food. Is that the same?
So yeah, I mean, well, first of all, the X doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, mine's X, sorry.
Yeah, so we could call it X. I'll just leave this as food element. This
But
can,
inside the if statement, that's what I returned. It doesn't look quite the same. Yeah, it looks more like, yeah, it looks like that. And then comma, and then
you spread out of X.
no, sorry, I spread over X, yeah.
Okay,
And then,
spread out over food.
no, not within the brackets. I just added, after the bracket, I just added a comma and then put food.
Yeah, that's probably gonna give us something weird. Let's,
Not inside the bracket though. Food's not in the bracket.
where's food?
It's outside. So put a comma and then food like that.
Oh, that's I don't know how that's not a syntax error.
Okay. I thought it was weird too.
What is
It works, so I'm not complaining.
it?
It also doesn't change the original, so.
I mean, you don't need to have any. I'm surprised that's not. I'm a little. I actually have no idea what that's doing.
Okay.
But you don't need it. Comma after. Okay. Yeah, you don't need it, and you also don't need to. Oh, you spread out over the food here, right?
Yeah. Oh, I spread out. Well, it would be food element actually there.
Oh, well. Oh, okay. Well, that is okay. All right.
Oh, I screwed you up. I'm sorry.
No, okay. So that is what is return, dude. I have no idea how what that's, but that's working.
Yeah, I don't mean to make more of a
Yeah.
confusion here. Sorry. I was just wondering.
No, I don't know. I mean, it works. I don't know why, but this would be like, well, this part, yeah, I'm a little confused what's going on there, but really, so all I need to do is return the food.
Okay.
Like, whatever this is doing, that's just confusing me. Yeah, I'm surprised that works. I don't know, like, what JavaScript thing's going on there. But, and yeah, this would definitely be not ideal because that is like, wait, what? Like if I was looking at that code, I'd be like, wait, what's going on here? Like if the element ID, if they're equal, I just want to return the food that was passed. Right? That's a lot more clean. A lot more readable. I'm gonna select that to myself though, because I'm gonna like, oh, look at that. If you would have shown me that code, I would have been like, that's going to be a syntax error. Interesting. Cool. Let's go to the filter. So this one let's do right in a separate function. So, this one takes a food and then an ID and then removes the food with the given ID. So const, I don't know what to call this. What should I call this? ID. Let's call this ID match. because really that's what I want this to do. Does it match the ID? So this function, and this is going to be another one that takes a food and an ID. Okay, we'll do it again. So I'm going to say, hey, return. Does the food .id equal the ID? That's all I want to see. So then I could do like a console.log. Let's call this ID match. ID match return. So this takes an ID. So for this one, there's the food object. And then I'll give it the ID that matches. So that's 12. And I'll give it one that doesn't match is 13. So this one's true and that one's false. Perfect. That's what I want this to do. It returns true or false, whether or not the ID matches the food ID. So then I could do a foods.filter, pass it a, so I can't just pass it this ID match function. Let's just see what happens. We're going to get like this similar issue. So let's do this. Let's give it the mix. So for this one, I want to give it, the Mexican foods, and then we'll give it ID 12. So this one should remove ID 12 because or let's do 1 because I do have 1 in that array. So I'll switch that to 1. Delete food, that's returning undefined. I forgot to return the result of my filter. So that's returning an empty array. So if I do a console.log, food, and ID. Now the ID, the thing I'm wanting to be the ID, because I defined this function as, hey, this gives a food and then something that should be like the ID. And the ID, when I pass it here, the filter is going to give me back the index. So the index is going to be like, okay, that's the filter method is going to be like, the ID is actually your index. Let's try this. Let's make this really confusing.
Wait, I have a quick question about that. Wouldn't it be just a lot more simple and easier to put all of that within the filter function?
Yes, it would be.
Okay, because that's what I have, and it seems a little bit more simpler to me, but I don't know if that one's
Yeah,
easier to understand.
yeah, let's go look at the filter. I'm kind of like, once again, as we're going through these, it's more, let's like look at how like these functions actually work. Let's go look at the documentation.
Okay. Okay.
So filter, once again, the first argument should be element, second could be index, third is array. So it's a lot like the map. So let's give this like X, and let's just see what console.log X is. Any guess what X is going to be after looking at this documentation?
X should be a whole array.
Yeah, X is going to, I'm thinking it's going to be the array of the thing that called the filter method. And there it is. So I should be able to grab like X at ID because ID is the index. Why is that not working? Is that not the index? Cannot read properties undefined. Reading 1. Let's do this one more time. X is a array. Right. Is array dot is array. That is a array. Can you do like the dot length? Let's go see if we can pull the length off of it. All right, it's not letting me grab the length. That's weird. That is strange because it's telling me it's an arrays, but I can't call the length on it. And I can't index it, but it's, oh wait, X false. There we go. So the first time. Okay, let's JavaScript. All right, let's see if we can see that again. Oh, it's from these first two calls. I'm not passing. Okay. So here's the thing. I'm calling ID match here where I'm not passing it in an array. All right. So now like I have like, and let's just like, so right here, when I'm calling ID match, I pass it the object. Now I'm passing it something that I expect to be the ID and not the index. When I first initially wrote that, and then I'm not passing it in array. There we go. Okay, but now I'm trying to have this ID match be two different functions. Like it's trying to do two different things. I'm having it one trying to just take a food and an ID and return true if it's not, but now I'm converting it into something I can pass to a filter method, which gives me the food. The ID is actually the index and X is the array. But so I'm just going to console out these two logs. We can do a X ID dot ID. This should work. Delete food return. I gotta give it one that actually exists. Let's delete one. Come on, as long as, oh, let's do a, let's do this console.log. And this is getting really confusing, right? X.id is 1. That's 2, that's 99. Yeah, okay. So now this, notice right here. Yeah. I'm getting really, so this is where I can get I can even confuse myself because I'm calling, this is not the ID, right? With how I'm using this. This is now the index. I'm actually, I called delete food I pass it this function, and I pass it 1 right here. But notice I'm actually not even using this ID anywhere here. It's never actually passing this second param anywhere. So I just kind of wanted to show you that, like, when I pass it this function, it's going to treat these 3 parameters as the element, the index, and the array. But this ID match, I really just want this to be the ID of the thing I want to delete. And so then here I would have to wrap this in a function where this is the actual food, so I can pass the food there. And I can also pass the ID. And there we go. Yay, we removed. Oh, I had this logic reversed. We removed the item with ID 1. Now, someone was saying, well, isn't it just cleaner to do it like this? I mean, because I can write this really cleanly. And just like write the logic here. Right, that's probably how you did this in the homework, right?
Yeah, that's how it looked.
So yes, if you can, but I'm gonna throw a caveat to this. Why it's important to kind of keep this in the back of your mind. I mean, we're not going to be, I would say, like, in this class, this is like how we would do it. But I kind of want to show a reason why this would maybe be the preferred way to do it. Let's say I have some const. Let's just say we're doing this ID match. And let's say this is really complicated. Just pretend. It's a little big code. This function is really complicated. And we use it in many files. So at this point, I'm not going to want to, like, for every time I want to do a filter, go in and do this logic every time over and over again. Because then, down the road, I'd do another filter and I'd run that, I'd have that hard coded code, I'd do it again. So I'm going to be duplicating and reusing all of that hard, complicated code. So if that was the case, then yes, I would want to throw that into a function and write it like this. Because then I can come in, like, in some other file, I can do that again. And maybe this is like, words, I don't know. And somehow this, like, works too. Does that, at least at a high level, does that make sense what I'm talking about? ID match maybe just can take in a object and an ID and match the IDs. And maybe that's really complicated, but I can reuse that logic.
Okay, so the way you're doing it now would be preferred. So then you can reuse that.
If this was hard, I mean, ID match is really easy, right?
Yeah.
So, I can just, give it the food. I mean, I can write this like really cleanly, like f.id not equal ID. There we go. Why don't I need a return here? Why don't I need to return this value? Because filter, my function, needs to return true or false, right? The answer is yes. So how come I don't need the return keyword right here?
Doesn't that arrow function kind of like automatically do it?
It's not that it's, I mean, it is partly that it is, this only works with arrow functions. But if I don't have curly brackets, I put in the curly brackets, now that does not work. If I have the curly brackets, I need the return. If I don't have the curly brackets, it will implicitly return this thing. So it's like if I can write something in one line is generally, I can kind of skip that. See, here's the thing though, and this is really what I want to just, I'm trying just to like get this to like sear into your brain. My filter function, I can pass it a callback. This callback, this takes, this parameter f, which is my food object. I could call this t. But this t is going to be a food object because I'm calling filter on the foods. So I pass it a function that returns true or false. Okay, well, I can do it this way too. I can pass my filter method a function that returns true or false, because this ID match is getting called, and this ID match is a function that returns true or false. They're doing the same thing. One, I'm storing to a variable and then to like a separate outside function, which would be nice because then I can, if I need to, I could reuse that function. And that would definitely be a reason to do that. Or I can just pass it a unnamed function, a one use case function. Like I can't reuse this function because it's not being stored to a variable or to like, it's just an anonymous function.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
And let's do this last one. And yeah, let's do this as both ways, just to like review what we just did. So let's write a function that returns true or false if a food is overpriced. Like, so I'm going to write a function const is overpriced. This takes a food and it takes a price. And so I can return, let's just write this in one line just to show you another example. Food dot price greater than price. I can write this function all in one line, and this will return this. So let's just, seeing is believing. Is overpriced, I can pass it a food, no ID, whatever. I really don't care if it has really all I care is this object has a price, right? Does this make sense? I'm calling it food here. Do I actually have to pass it a food object? In my method, all I'm using is this dot price key. So I could actually pass it anything that just has a price key, like book. Name taco. Just pass me any object that has a price key and I'll tell you, and a price, and I'll tell you if it's overpriced. Do greater equal to, so. Console.log is overpriced. Oh, duh, I need to call this function actually. Is overpriced. Is overpriced. So, this book Dune is overpriced because it's $100 and I want to see if it's over $10. Let's make that a little more obvious. A taco's $10. I'm saying the overprice is 1,000. I'm saying this needs to be a food, but really it just needs to be anything with that price key. Does that make sense? Because that's the only thing I'm using in this function is the food.price.
I thought with this function, you were supposed to remove any foods that were over the price that you gave it.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay,
That's what I did also.
cool. Let's just reverse. Okay, I'll just reverse that sign. It's an easy enough fix. So we'll reverse the sign, so that'll just flip it. Cool. So there's my overpriced function. So now I can do my foods dot filter. Give it the food is overpriced. Food and the price. Delete food too, so we'll give it the Mexican array and then we'll give it a price. Let's say like, I don't know what prices do I have in here. Let's do $1, $10, and like $200. And we'll say anything over, $20 is overpriced. Run this. All right.
Your food dot filter should be foods dot filter, right?
Yes. Foods dot filter. I'm forgetting this return.
Yeah, I was getting an empty array for a while. This one took me a while.
Okay, so delete food, we're calling delete food, foods dot filter. Food is overpriced. Returning true. This is a weird way to, okay. I see the problem. And that is, so remember my filter method, I need to pass it a function that returns true or false. And we just said, hey, if I write this with curly brackets, it's not going to, this function is not going to return anything. I need to return the function call, this value is overpriced. Or I just don't write the curly brackets. And there we go. Just get rid of the curly brackets altogether. Now I don't have any returns. Write this in one line. Delete food 2, give it foods and price. Foods.filter food is overpriced food price. All in one line. 2 implicit returns. There's an implicit return right there. And there's an implicit return right there. So that might be, in my mind, you're like, ooh, I wrote this in one line. That's really readable, right? I'm like, well, maybe if you're comfortable with, you know, implicit returns and all this stuff, I think this might be better to write, you know, to have those returns in there. I don't know if this one needs it. I think that one's fine without it. But I could, if I wanted to, write this in one line. Or just to be explicit about it. There we go. Oh yeah, but let me just do this, just to write this a different way. Delete food 2A. Yeah, if I wasn't planning on reusing this like is overpriced function, then yeah, I can just write this as one line. It's equal to price, and that would work too. This is a function that I give it an object that has a price key, and I check to see if that price key is less than or equal to this price variable, and that returns true or false. This is also a function right here. See how I'm still passing this like that anonymous function. I'm passing my filter a anonymous function here who returns the value of this function call is overpriced, which takes a food and a price. This function returns a Boolean. So this returns a Boolean, which then is returned by this function. Yeah, so there's a return here. This gets returned, the Boolean gets returned to the filter. The filter uses that Boolean to say whether or not it should keep the thing in the array, and then we return the array at the end. That's just like inception, right? I'm like really glad we're doing JavaScript first, because we don't have to. I think when we throw this in with like Rails, I think people were really, past students were getting by, because the code does, you're going to see in like a couple of weeks, the code starts to get a little repetitive in a lot of ways. And it can, I think it can get easy to like not understand what's really going on and having your code work, because you just kind of copy and paste stuff, and you like, or you're like following along from an example and you're kind of coding along with it, and you just need to change a couple things. But by doing this, I really hope it's, and I'm sure it is, it's just like mental gymnastics, right? Trying to keep track of all of this. But I think it's, I know it's definitely confusing, but how much better do you feel about functions today than you did like day one of the course? thumbs up, thumbs down.
I understand them a little better, but
I'm
I
feeling
mean,
better.
when we start getting into like functions and functions and functions and functions, it gets confusing. But
Yeah, and that's everything. Like one of the most, I think, hardest things with coding is, and it's not just with functions, it's just like the nesting, the like inception of it all. Because coding really is, let's just take something simple and reuse it. But then that ends up adding this complexity of like, you're building this really complicated thing with simple parts, and there's a lot of just interconnectivity. And that to me, that's where it gets really confusing. It's like you have all these pieces eloquently working together. And it can get very, very confusing to kind of have that big picture of like, how are all these moving pieces working together? That to me is hard.
I
For
think
me, there'll be
this-
times where I like understand the function in and out. It's really easy to me. And then there'll be other times where like my brain just goes blank and then I kind of lose the track of the function for a sec. So sometimes I have to go back from the beginning and do everything.
Oh yeah, for sure. You'll see me do that all the time. You'll see me just be like just get like stuck and be like, wait, what am I thinking about now? It just gets jumbled up. And you kind of do need to go back and like reread it. I'm like, okay, I'm so confused. I'm lost. I've confused myself. I need to go back and like go look at it again. Happens to me all the time. I mean, you saw me, it happened like, I mean, today was more so because I was like doing things in ways I normally don't do it. So I was like you saw me get tripped up. It's like, man, wait, what is going on here? And then kind of have to like go back and investigate. So let's take a break. I'm going to Slack this out. Let me do that right now. But yeah, this is all really, I mean, because with this, we're getting good practice with functions, we're getting good practice with arrays and objects. And really what we're kind of learning here, especially the way we're doing things, like we're doing very like functional, it's kind of like a style functional programming. It's not just that we're writing functions. We're writing all these functions that don't mutate. Like that's how we're doing it. So we're writing, they're also called pure functions. And we don't have to get too much into this, but this is, this is becoming like a pretty common paradigm. So we're getting some good practice with the way we're doing this, because we're doing this in a functional programming way. So it's going to make you a better developer, not just a better React developer or JavaScript developer. It's really, you are going to be able to apply these things to different languages. So it's kind of like you learn this stuff once and then it's a lot easier like when you go learn this in like a different language. So cool. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 11:05.
sounds good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. So actually, let's just continue where we left off yesterday with our CRUD app. So let me do this. I'll remove my app and I'll clone it down. So if you were following along yesterday, we got so we went kind of quick through this yesterday. So if you want to clone it down and follow these steps so you can have a working version and follow along, I'll go ahead and do that. So go ahead, cd to your whatever directory you want to create this. And I'll throw this command out in Slack. We're going to do a git clone.
Do we use that same file that we were using yesterday, or just create a new one and then clone it?
If you want, if yours is working, you don't need to do this. If from yesterday where it's working,
Alright.
you can, if you just want to clone and just be, start where I'm starting, I'll throw this out in Slack. Okay, so
I have a quick question. So yesterday when I was creating a React app through Yarn, it created the React app, but it didn't create like a repository for it. Should I just run a Git in it for that?
no, I mean, I'll have to,
Because it ran everything and then it pulled up the app and everything, but it didn't create a repository.
and you CD'd into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I was already in the file and then I created it. So I don't know if that was what caused it.
Wait, what do you mean you were already in the file?
I think I'd already created the file for it, and then I CD'd into that file and then ran the yarn create.
Okay, you can't CD into a file. So you created
Or not file, it was a
directory.
It was a directory, yeah.
That still shouldn't matter because you want to create a directory like this week too. This is just wherever I run the yarn create React app, or for that matter, the Git clone. It's going to create, that project in whatever directory I ran that. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
ran it in week 2. You could have created a directory called user CRUD clone and then run yarn create user CRUD clone. And then you just would have had a directory, your React app would have been in that directory. But yeah, if you don't, you have been having Git issues. So yeah, if you CD into that project, that has like this stuff inside of here, right? If you do like an ls, it has that and it doesn't have the Git stuff because it should, but yeah, your Git is so screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it doesn't, then yeah, you need to do a Git in it.
Okay.
And
I just want to make sure it wouldn't cause any issues.
yeah. Cool. So I cloned this project and then I CD'd into the project. So if you're following along, I'll also type this cd user CRUD clone. And we're going to also do a yarn, not a yarn start, just yarn. So I'm going to run yarn.
I was kind of already getting ahead. I did a yarn start. Is that gonna mess anything up?
Yeah, your app's not going to work. So, well, actually, did you do the clone?
No.
Okay. The yarn is for, so if you're cloning, so I'm cloning a project down from GitHub. Now GitHub, when I push up to GitHub, I'm not actually pushing that node modules folder. I do push up the package JSON, And the package JSON tells me what I need to download. So when I run yarn, it looks at the package JSON and then it goes and installs all the things. Running yarn like multiple times isn't like, it's not going to be bad. It's just like now that I run yarn again, it's just going to say, hey, you know, everything's resolved. You already have all these packages. So yeah, now I can run. Well, I want to open this up in code, so I'll do a code dot. And then I can do a yarn start. So pretty easy to clone a repo. You just clone it, you CD into it, you run yarn, like, and then you can open up in code and run yarn start for any like React project. Cool. So here's our app that we did yesterday. We can click the Get Users button. Remember, that does the API call to grab the users, and we actually had delete working. So let's look at our code really quick, just to kind of review. I think I should have this be something other than yo-yo. User demo. Just clean this up too as well. Okay. So we have a couple things going on here. We have this button where when we click, we call this get users function. So the get users is doing a couple things. We're keeping track of this loading state because we want to disable our button when our API call is going on, because we don't want the user to like keep on clicking it. And then we also want to give them some like UI saying, hey, this is loading. So that's what we're doing there. This is just a Boolean that's keeping track whether or not we're loading the data. We also have some error state. So if like we type in a bad URL, for some reason the website's down, we do some simple error handling. So before we get the users, we're going to set loading to true, and we're going to set this error state to null, just in case if there was an error beforehand, because it's like we're trying again to get the data. And then we're going to use Axios to get our data. So we do an axios.get request, and then we give it the URL. Now this actually goes up to this website and grabs us some data. Now we use this .then.catch syntax because this .get, if I hover over this, I can see this result. This returns a promise. So this function returns a promise, and a promise is something that is promising to either resolve or reject. The resolve means it was successful. The reject means an error occurred. So we have these two cases, the .then and .catch, where we can pass those a function or a callback function to run when either it is successful. So there's the function we run when it's successful, when our Axios call is successful, and there's the function we run if there's an error. So if our function's successful, we can grab this response. And from yesterday, when we looked at that, we saw that like this res.data.data, that was how we actually had to go in to get our user state, because that was actually the array of users. So maybe, and then once that's done, we can also set loading to false, because that means once we're in this .then and we've set our users, we can say, hey, we've loaded the data. Likewise, with the error, we can catch an error. So if an error occurs, we're going to catch it. We can just set our error message to, some error occurred and set loading to false. So this way, if I like change the URL, which would give me an error, because that's not a valid URL. I click get users. Now my Axios call triggers an error because that's not a valid URL. If I make that valid again, and I click get users, that resets my error. It does the actual Axios call and grabs my users. Cool. And remember another thing we did. So right here in this div, we're mapping over the users. We do a users.map. And let's throw this in a function just as like partly a review and just to clean this up. I'm going to create a function called render users. And I'm going to just delete this because we're going to redo that. Inside of here, I'm going to call render users.
Wait, James, before you move forward, when
Yeah.
I'm on the local host, it says it's not, the site can't be reached. Do I just have to do another yarn on my terminal?
No, you need to do a yarn start.
Okay.
I bet you probably don't have your server running. So now for, so I'm just going to redo what we did inside of this div, but let's do it inside of a function. Just because this was something we did that was a little new yesterday. So remember, we have a user component that we also made yesterday. So our user component really just is kind of like a UI thing. It's really not much going on here. We have, we're just going to pass this user component some props. We're going to give it a first name props, the last name props, email, ID, avatar, and actually this function delete user yo prop. So let's go ahead and, because when we look at our JSON, we have an ID key, we have an email, first name, last name, avatar, and yeah, so we want to pass these on down. So let's do this. Let's do a return because I want to return my user state. Users.map. Let's just do taco. What is taco? So here I'm stringifying users. And then so I can see this array of users. That's my users array. So if I do users.map and I call this taco, what is taco going to be?
That's
A
just your
user?
users, right?
That's going to be a user. It's going to be a user object that has ID, email, first name, last name, avatar. What is yo going to be?
They'll just be undefined right now, right?
Oh, this is,
Would that be, oh, that would be the first item in that array or object?
Isn't it the index?
Yeah, it's the index. And
Yeah.
actually, as I'm hovering over this, you can kind of see, it's giving me a little hint. Like it's saying, hey, give this map function a callback and it can give you like the value. It's saying value. That can be any type of data. Index, that's a number. The array, and that's just an array of any kind of things. So
Right,
what,
so that'd be the first number in your index, right?
let's just, let's do this. Let's just return as a paragraph. Yo.
So you're doing this right under the button. This is where you're putting this function.
Yeah.
Because you deleted like a whole list out of there, right? It was a whole list before.
Yeah, I'm just putting because the UI was working, I'm just throwing this in the function just so it's a little more clean. And so we can re-look at it again. So if I do users.map, I'm passing it this function. Any ideas what my UI is going to look like?
Yeah, I would just log all of your IDs, right? Because that's the first one.
Yeah, the yo is the current index, and it's not the ID, it's the index of the array.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, because that's where the ID is.
Yeah, it's not the ID. It's
Yeah, no,
ID and
I know what
index.
you're saying.
Yeah, two different words.
Yeah,
Is a key in our object. The index is the index of the array.
yeah, I'm saying ID is in that place of that first index.
ID is in.
ID is the first index in that array, right?
No. ID is not. See, these are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The IDs are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those don't match. See, this is the 0 is, hey, this is the index of the array. This is the 0 index. If I did, let's just be really, so remember.
Oh yeah, I see. So it's the whole object is going to be that 0 index, and then the 1 index, and then.
There's your ID. If I wanted to grab the ID, this is a really weird way to do it. I grab X because X is actually my users.
Okay,
Yo,
that makes sense. So it's showing their index.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So yo is the index. But yeah, and then taco is the actual thing. So I don't need to these are kind of, we don't really use those that much because I can I just can grab the ID from the taco. There's my taco ID. I can grab all of these things from the taco. But I probably shouldn't call that taco. I should probably call that user, It had a last name, right? U.last name. Oh,
So
user.
this function is telling you what to grab out of the database, what exactly you specifically want out of it.
Nope, this has nothing to do with the database.
So what is this one doing again?
So here's because right here, this render users, this is rendering our users. So that's what it's doing. So we have and right here, just to show you, let's just do this. What our user state, our users state looks like. Let's do this as an H1. So this is a little more visible. This is more, I'm just putting this here for tutorial visual purposes. So what our user state looks like. So here's our user state. It's an array of objects. That is not, really pretty. I want to go in and make it look nice. So my render users is doing that. It's taking my user state, mapping over it, and putting it into into a JSX format. Right? That's what our map does. We want to take an array of something and convert it to an array of something else. We're taking an array of objects and converting it to this array of beautiful JSX HTML. Right? But we also created a user component, to handle this because, there's quite a bit of stuff going on in a user. This could maybe get a little messy. So instead of doing this, I'm just going to return my user component. I need to import it. It might actually be already imported. Cool. So now I go through each of my users and I return my user component. Okay, well now it doesn't have the actual email ID and avatar. So I need to pass that as props. Because my user, it's like using things like props.first name, props.last name, props.email. So I need to pass that. Now they all have the same email. Well, that's not really useful. Why don't I pass the user.email? Now they all, see, I'm going through, I can look at my user state. There it is right there. There's their emails. But now instead of just that array of objects, I'm doing it as an array of user components. And yeah, I could do like the first name equals user dot first name. And now they're all getting their first names. Now I could do this for all of the keys, but remember my user is one of these objects. It is a JavaScript object. User looks like that. It's an object that has those things. So I could pass these all down as props like this, like write them out, but there's a shorthand. I can just destructure my user, this object. And voila, that passes all of those props down. It just takes the key like ID and sets it equal to user.id. It's also going to yell at me for not having a key. So I need to give it a key prop. So for that, I'm going to use user.id. Clear this log. Cool. Now that warning's gone. Now I click on my delete. Now I'm getting this error. Props.delete user yo is not a function. So that's in my user.js line 9. So I go to my user line 9, props.delete user is undefined. Let's also do this. Let's just console.log. Props. You can see what the hell are props. See how we're logging props for each user. Props are just a JavaScript object that have email, avatar, first name, ID, last name. It just has all of the things within this object. But I don't see delete user on that, the delete user yo. Okay, well, let's give this a delete user yo prop. Kind of just expecting that to be a function. And why am I expecting that to be a function? Because in my user component, I'm calling it like a function. Let's clear that. I click delete. It's not doing anything because this is just an empty function. Let's do a console.log. Clicked. Let's clear this. Sweet. Well, now it's logging click. What if I want to give it an ID? Click. Just kind of doing another review of function. ID is user.id. Really don't even need that right there. ID is 6, ID is 5. So you can see that it's logging that, but we actually made a delete user function that takes an ID and removes it. So instead of just logging this, doing this function, let's pass it delete user and let's give it the user.id. Right, this goes through our app. It's going to filter out the ID and it's going to set the new users. We had this working yesterday. Let's get our users. So I'm going to clear this, get users. Get users. All right, what's going on here? That just seemed to break our app. And you can see, actually, let me clear the console.
Mine didn't like when I put user.id inside the delete user function.
You have it called.
The user is not defined.
Yeah, so you probably have it called something else right here in your map. This
Yes,
is
I do. You're right. You're right.
because that's where I'm defining that parameter. Sweet. So notice how when I click get users, it's doing those logs in app.js and then the ID. Like, just to make this more clear, deleting item ID. Let's get my users. Well, that's not good. I get my users, they render, and then I delete them. Why is that happening?
Is it because it's just automatically deleting them because there's no like button to delete them? Like no.
Yeah, it's a little, so this one, let's go, because there is a button. Here's our on click, props.delete user.
Oh yeah. But it just looks like it's automatically deleting them without a call.
Yeah, because what am I actually doing? What is this actually doing right now? When I render my users, this is
It's
actually
just deleting them.
Automatically deleting them.
Yeah, it's automatically going to run that function. So I need to, wrap that in a function. So it doesn't call until it's triggered, until it's clicked. So now I can load. There's my users. They're not getting deleted, but when I click, then they do get deleted.
Can you Slack that so I can get caught up?
Yeah. So I'll select this out. And yeah, so this is as far as we got yesterday. I didn't do anything new. We refactored the code a little. But as far as like the functionality, this was what we got done yesterday, where we were able to get the users and we were able to delete a user. All right. So let's now create a user. So I think for today, we could, like I said, when we get into create and update, there's going to be a lot of different ways to do it. So today I'm going to have it, we're just going to have two separate components, one for creating and one for updating. We could definitely combine them into one form, but I think this will keep it simpler to have two separate forms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and create a new file and call this new user. Oh my gosh, user form. You know, because forms can get complicated. There can be a lot of stuff in here. I could write all of this stuff in my app.js, but you know, we're going to want to start getting used to, I'll just call this new user. I don't want to keep it short. We want to kind of start separating this logic into different components. So let's just get this rendering. So new user. It's going to return. Now let's just do like a basic form. The button. Maybe wrap this in a something that I think that can be maybe helpful for you is, even though it's not going to look, it's not about making it look good. If we just add like a border, so we can really see where these components are, like where they're being housed. So let's do this like 2 pixels solid and just make it like obnoxious, like green. But now I'm going to know, like, wherever that green border is, that's where my new user form is living. Export default new user. And yeah, maybe I can right here do an H1. Say something like user form. So now in my app.js, I want to render this. So let's maybe do this like maybe I don't know, do I want to do it above? Let's do it below my button. I guess it doesn't really matter, but just come in and do my new user, import that. So I auto imported my new user from that file. And there it is. Maybe just kind of maybe add some horizontal. The HR is just like a line. This might create a little bit of space, like visually. Okay, so there's my new user form. There it is in its lovely green box. Cool. Maybe I actually do want this above that button. Not that it really matters, but so I might get rid of these lines. Yeah, it's not looking great, but so I'm going to do one more thing. Just space is just. I'm going to do some margin. Let's do a lot of margin. So there's some separation and maybe some padding. Okay, so my new user form just pops. Yeah. Then we can click get users. There's our users. And yeah, maybe for my users, once again, we can make this maybe a little obnoxious and have those be, blue. So we can really see these individual. So anything with a blue border, I know is like a user component. The green border is my form. My whole app. Maybe I just do a style border. Or like, 5 pixels, make this really big, solid black. Let's also just give this like some margin. Maybe a little bit of padding. I think this just might help. By doing this, it just might help visualize stuff. So everything within this black border, like this black border, that's my app component. Anything with, the green, that's my form, and then the blue, those are my user components. So I can kind of just show you like the nesting of everything. Cool.
Why'd everything get shoved off to one side?
Why is everything getting shoved to one side?
Yeah, just
That's just kind of the default, like left align everything.
Is it because you removed the app CSS?
Yeah. If yours is not, you probably have the class name.
Class name app, and it centers everything.
Is it just app?
Capital APP.
APP.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah. So that class name, that's going to be applying styles from the app.css. So if I look at .app, that's using text align center, which, you probably don't want to have that be a default style wrapping your whole app, because everything's going to be text align centered. Cool. But whatever, we can leave that there for this demo. So there we go. So let's go back to the user form and let's start filling this out. So what kind of inputs do you think I want for a new user?
Like an insert or an edit, so you can edit the information or put information in.
Well, this is just for new.
You want a name, you want an email, an ID, and an avatar.
Yeah, I want to. So I'm not going to do an ID.
Okay.
The reason, well, for an ID, what we won't have, normally the ID, and you don't know this, so the ID is going to be generated by the backend. Like it's going to be the server that's going to generate the ID. We'll just do one randomly because we're not working with the database with this one. So we'll randomly come up with an ID. Yeah, but we'll need the email. We'll actually want the first name and last name. So we don't want name. We actually want to match these keys.
Right.
So we'll come in here. I'm going to do a paragraph. So we'll do email. This is just so the user can see what this is going to be. And then we'll do, let's just start with email. Let's just get one done at a time. So this is going to be the value is going to be email. And on change, these become pretty repetitive. So this is, I'm going to give this on change a function that takes an event. So
Now is on change React or JavaScript?
It's React. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of both. Like an HTML element has an on change event. This one is specific to React, but yeah, if you're writing on HTML, you could write a on change handler. But yeah, it would kind of, after that, kind of be a little different. Because since this is JSX, I can just go ahead and write a function right here. If this was HTML, I could not do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a set email function to be, I'm going to pass it e.target.value. So this email, if I run this now, email and set email are not defined. What do you think I'm like doing here? Or what do you think I need?
The use state.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, these are gonna be state. So I'm gonna have const email and set email equal use state. And if I refresh this, I'll get an error, use state's not defined, because I need to import use state from React. So now I go to my form, click add user. Wait, what? Why did all my users disappear? Well, by submitting this button, this submits this form, and the default behavior of a form submit is to like refresh your page. It's actually doing a HTTP request, which refreshes your page. We don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a onSubmit handler to my form, handle submit. And I'm going to write this function handle submit. This is a function with a parameter e. Now e is when I pass this handle submit function to the onSubmit, it's the form, this onSubmit is saying, hey, give me a function that has a parameter, and I'm going to treat that parameter like it's the submit event. And on that event is a prevent default function.
So what you submit will technically turn to your parameter E.
So with so think about like, it's kind of like when I pass, it is the exact same when I'm passing like my map function. So when JavaScript, when the, because this is an array and the map is a function on arrays, and it's saying, hey, give me a function, and this parameter you give me is going to be the thing in the array. So I think, so I can treat that like it's going to be each individual thing in the array because I'm giving this map a function. So it's the same idea where I'm saying, hey, here's the function form, here's the function I want you to run when the submit button's clicked. And the submit button will also say, hey, you can define this function, you can call it whatever, you can give it a parameter, and this parameter will be the submit event. It's the same thing with the onChange. It's like, hey, give it a function, and you can give it a parameter, and the parameter is going to be the event of the thing that was clicked. It's going to be like the event, that the change event. And on that event, there's an e.target.value, which is going to be the key that was pressed. Now, my handle submit, I'm not going to have an e.target.value because this is a form submission event. This is a button click submission event. So they're going to be different in like what functions they have on it. If that makes, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
It's this is the thing you got to wrap your head around. And I know it's confusing. It's like the map function is saying, hey, give me a function that tells me what to do with each thing in the array. The handle submit says, hey, give me a function that tells me how you want to handle this form submission. This on change says, hey, give me a function how you want to handle the input that was changed. The click, when we click on something, it's say, hey, give me a function that tells me how you want this click to be, what you want me to do with this.
So that submit is automatically refreshing, and now you got to configure it and specifically tell it what to do whenever you do click it, and you would want it to be stored data, right?
Well, I don't want it to refresh. So that's right now, that's what I want to stop it from doing. So I do the e.prevent default. So now I can get my users. I can click add user now, and it's not refreshing the page. Let's also do a console.log email, because this is where I'm going to want to like do stuff with that email input. Email input value. That's just going to be my email. So I can open up my log console, click add user, and there's that value. Sweet. So now like test.com. So now I have a way when I click form, I have, that's exactly what I want. I want to be able to grab whatever the user put in that form.
So the next step would be how to add it to other users.
Yeah, the next step's going to be, well, how do I get that? Well, I mean, we still need to get all the other forms done, all the other inputs. But yeah, we're going to want to eventually add to users state. But I don't really have all the information yet, right? I only have the email. So I need to do all the other stuff. So I need the first name, right? First name. Actually, let's do this like this. No, let's do first name. I'm going to just, for fun, okay, we see how email works. This name, first name. How would I get, so here's my use state. These are the variables. Let's just call them foo and bar. Common variable, just random variable names. And I want to get this input working. How do I do that?
You need to switch the value equals email to foo.
Okay, that one becomes foo.
And then the rocket set email, doesn't that need to be bar?
The set email becomes bar. And if I console.log, first name value, what is that going to be?
Well, it's going to give you the email. So you want to change email to foo?
Yes.
Hey, I'm learning.
There you go. So yeah, my form, like the UI looks good. So that's like email, first name. There you go. The email is email. The first name value is first name. Cool.
So now you would still have to add the last name, the ID, and the avatar if they do have one.
Yeah, so we're not gonna do the ID in the form. We'll do that a different way. So, but yeah, let's do the last name. And I'll just leave these ones here just so it's there. We'll also just I'm going to kind of let's see, how do I want to do this? Actually, I'm going to do this like this. I kind of want to, this is something I'm going to want you to look at. And this is because this is bad convention, because what I'm going to be doing is like something as simple as like bad variable names and changing like whether or not something's camel cased. And then we'll do the foo bar example here. Okay, so I'm actually going to switch this to first name and actually set first name. We're going to have, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to do my last name. This one's going to be using camel case. And then I'm going to do an avatar, which will use foo and bar.
Wait, I thought we already used. Oh, you changed it. Never mind.
Yeah, because what I wanted to kind of show the difference between snake case and camel case. Because this might come up, and because we're getting our data back from the database as snake case.
Yeah, snake case.
But you know, it's also JavaScript convention, maybe where you're working, it might be JavaScript convention to use camel case. But you might be using a API that's giving you back snake case. So I kind of just want to.
Is there a big difference between the two and why you use them, or is it kind of just different operate, like the different systems?
It is it's convention. Yeah, it's just convention. Both, this is all valid JavaScript. This works.
Okay. I think I just prefer the look of the camel casing. It's a little easier to read, so then it's not as long, I think.
Question, if you go back to the form that you were at, how did you get that little email icon?
Good question. I don't know.
It literally just popped up after you did that. It wasn't there before.
Yeah, that's weird.
Oh, that might be a last. Well, I think so. I have that looks like it's a last pass thing. So I have the last, that's an extension. So it's maybe just seeing this is an email field.
That makes sense.
So
all right.
Maybe if I misspell this to like email, or I have a. I'm just gonna do a break right here for this button. I don't know. Maybe because, yeah, who knows? Maybe because I did write something that looks like an email there. Who knows what's going on there? Cool. So yeah. So what I want to do, let's just like console.log my object, because I want to build out a object. So new, let's just make this as a variable, let new user equal. Now, so I'm having these weird variable names. The important thing is what the state looks like in my app.js, my user state, because I want to match that. So my users object looks like this: ID, email, first underscore name, last underscore name, avatar. So let's have our new user match that object. So I want to have an ID. That's going to be a number.
So this is whenever it gets stored, how it's gonna get stored? Like what order it's getting stored in?
For right now, I just want to create from my form values. I just want to log an object that looks like this.
Okay,
And then we're going to want to send that somehow to our app.js to add to our user state. But
okay.
let's kind of just worry about this first thing first. So I want to give this an ID, and this is where I'm just going to do, for now, since we're not using a database, I'm just going to do math.random. So I want to do first name, first underscore name. That's going to be equal to first underscore name. What do I want to do? How is last name going to look?
So instead, you should now do camel casing.
Well, for the key though, this is where like I need to match the state, because let's do camel casing. Does this object now, is this now matching the objects here?
I think you need to set your camel case equal to the snake case.
Yeah. See, this is not, this is last name. The key is going to be the last.
Underscore name,
Yeah. So I
and
want
then
this.
camel case the right side.
Yeah. So this is the key. And then the value is my state. And then for my avatar. And yeah, this is, like I said, I'm doing this. I'm making this kind of not confusing, but I'm just trying to, these are bad names. I mean, to mix and match like
So now
this.
your avatar would be foo, because
Yeah.
you have a value as foo on the input at the bottom.
Yeah, my avatar would be foo. That's how do you spell avatar? With an A. And even like the spelling needs to be the same. I had it with an O. That would be an issue, right? Because now my spelling would be off. Like the spelling has to match. The capitalization, so it's case sensitive. That's like really the word, and then email is email. And then we can console.log new user. So we can go through, I can add the email, test.com, whatever, first name, John, Frank, avatars, like some URL here. I can click add user. And there we go. I have an object that has ID, which is a number, first name, which is a string, last name, which is a string, avatar, URL, and my email. And that's going to, you see how this object is nice and it matches one of these objects. It's the same type of data. Just a little trick with JavaScript. If in ES6, if your key and value are the same, if they have the same name, you actually don't need to say email. You can just say email. So to do this, the key and value have to be spelled the same. So I can't do that with ID because ID is calling a function. I can do it with first name because the key and value are going to be the same. I can't do it with last name because they're spelled differently. Can't do it with the avatar because they're two different things, but I can do it with email. Just to like prove to you that works. There you go. So let's put that comment there. Key and value are same. like email can just become email. So you'll see that syntax a lot because coders are lazy. We don't like to type. Cool. So yeah, now we're ready. So now we have this new user. Now we're ready to add this to the user state. But looking at my user state, and I can kind of see this visual, like our user state is living in our app.js, right? It doesn't live in the form, it lives in our app.js. So what I need to do, and this is what I did with my delete function, is I need to write a function inside of my app.js. This takes a user, I'm expecting this to take a user. So I could say something like let new users. What is this? How do I do this? How do I add something to an array without changing the array?
Map.
Not map, because map. So when you think about map, it's not going to add or remove anything. It's going to change.
Right. Okay.
Filter is going to remove. Push is
That would mutate it, right?
yeah, push would mutate it. I want to clone the array. So push is close. Push would maybe work in a different case, but not with React. And how
Could you do clone and then push, or would that just kind of defeat the purpose?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I could that would work. I could say let new users. I could clone users. This would totally work. And I could do new users dot push user. That is totally, that would not mutate the array because that clones my users, stores it to my new users array. And then I could do like set users to new users.
Okay, yeah, that was sort of what I was meaning when I meant push.
Yeah. But so that would work, but a cleaner way would just be to clone the array and then add user to it. So this would create a copy of the array and then add that thing that was passed to it. But if you did that, this would also work. But I'll leave it like this. I mean, really, I don't even need to store that to a variable.
You need to put set users, add user, right? Not new users. Oh wait, no. Never mind. Ignore me.
Yep. And I really don't even need to store that to a variable. I could just do that. But I think this might be a little more readable for now. So now I have this add user function that will do this, right? This should work. But what I need to do is I need my form to call this function. So I actually need to pass this to my form. I'm just going to change the name so they're different. So we know that, and they're also color coded. So the white value, the add user, that's the actual function. The add user CB for callback, that's the name of the prop. So my new user has a add user callback and its value is that function. So now in my new user, I can do a props dot add user callback, and then pass it that new user that I was logging. Now I get this error, props is not defined. Well, where do I define props? Props is just a parameter. It's actually what did I say? What type of data structure is props always going to be? I mean, here's an example of our user props. When we give props to user, it's
Just an object.
yeah, it's an object. And I could destructure add user prop right there. There's my user. But I'm going to keep it like this for now, just so it makes you say props dot. So you know you're getting that from props. The add user callbacks coming from props. So this is adding it to the end of my array. That worked. What if I want to add the user to the beginning of my array?
You would switch those?
Yeah, I can just say, hey, this is one of the nice things about that. You just add it to the start. So now we can do like, you know, new, last, whatever, just something new. Change that, click add user. And there's our user. And the reason I want to give it an ID is so we can delete it. We just randomly, normally when we get to databases, the databases will be responsible for giving us back the ID and making sure it's unique. But for now, we'll just kind of hard code that. Sweet. The last thing I can maybe do in this new user form is, you know, just clear all my state. Just do set email. Set first name. Set last name. Bar. That would clear the values.
So what was that you just did at the end?
I'm just using all of these, my setters, just to clear all of these state to go back to the, like just an empty string.
So, so after you submit it, it's going to return it to an empty string. So you could submit another one if you wanted to.
Yeah. And that's just kind of what you would expect, right? You know, you add something, it would add, and then it would clear out your form.
If we go back to the code, so did you put that in the handle submit so when you click the button it does that, or can you put that anywhere?
I mean, I can call these anywhere.
Okay. I was just curious if you had to put it in that bracket for a reason, or if you could do it at another place, or so.
Yeah, I mean, we could add a button that's like, oh, clear values. Could do it there.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. This is like more like a UX thing. You know, it's like, hey, you know, when we submit a form, we should
Reset
values.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hey, I got an error or a warning that said each child in the list should have a unique key prop.
Yeah, so that's going to be whenever you're mapping over something. So that's probably in your app.js when we map over the users. So the render users, I give it a key. And this needs to be something unique. Well, I'm expecting my ID to be unique.
I did do that.
So are you mapping over something else? Or you just need to clear your console? And then refresh. Where else are we doing are we doing a map somewhere else? I think that's the only place we're doing a map, right?
Think so.
Yeah, so when I add, I can fill everything out and add a user, it'll leave all the values blank in the new user. Looks like first name and last name aren't being added. I'm just getting email and ID. I don't know what's going
Yeah,
on.
I'm getting something similar. The only value that's returning is my avatar.
Let's look at it. We can look at both of them. Does someone want to share first? I think these can be good to look at together.
And if you don't mind, could you just update that Slack, please?
Yes. Actually, I'm just gonna push this to GitHub. I think that'll be easier because now there's quite a bit of files now. So let me push this to GitHub and then I'll Slack out the GitHub link.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would probably be a better idea.
Just give me 1 second. Commit. And it's, even though I cloned it, it's still linking to the same repo. So it's going to be this CRUD repo. So I just pushed up, so that should all be up to date to the code I have. Okay.
Thank you.
Sweet. So let's look at this. All right. So when you wait, what happened when you added something? You don't have the email and first name or avatar. Is that correct? Okay, we have the avatar. Okay, let's look at your email. So let's go to your form. And scroll. Yeah, so when you have your new user, you're not sending the email. So line 16, you're not sent, that object does not include the email value. Right? Line 16. You have ID, first name, last name, avatar, but you don't have email. Cool. So now that should work. Cool. There you go. That's everything, right? You're on mute if you're talking.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even realize that. But yeah, that's everything.
Cool.
Mine's still not working. Can we look at mine?
Yeah, for sure. I think these are good to look at together because I guarantee you you're going to run into stuff like this. All right. So you're not showing the ID of that one. Okay. Yeah, so go back to your code.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
All right. So when you log your new user, I can at the bottom, what type of data is that?
When I logged my new user at the bottom, where's that?
Yeah, it's at your browser. In your browser, you're like new user JS 14.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
That's an object.
Is it an object? What? It's an object, but what else is it?
Array?
Yeah, it's an array with an object in it.
Okay.
So we don't want our form to create an array of one object. We just want it to be a object.
Okay.
So, because then you're going to be pushing on to an array. Instead of pushing on an object, you're pushing on an array with an object in it.
Oh, so that's right here, huh?
Yeah. So then you don't want to wrap that in that array.
Okay. Hey, cool.
There you go. And then, yeah, I think the reason why maybe you're getting, well, who knows? Yeah, I guess it wasn't getting the key. So for that one, it wasn't getting the key. It wasn't getting anything. So you get that warning and it wouldn't show up.
Okay, but that's what it's supposed to be doing now, right?
Yep, that looks good.
All right.
Cool. Any other questions? I think this would be a good time for a break. And then we'll do update. The good old lovely update.
Hey,
Sounds good.
while we go on break, can you help me get mine to work too?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
So come back at 12:30
Copy.
and yeah, you can share your screen.
I'm joining right now.
Has anyone, before you guys get into that, has anyone seen what's been happening in
Ukraine?
yeah, this morning?
Yeah, and they're trying to do cyber attacks too.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I have a friend who went on a mission there,
Oh, damn.
and so he has a lot of friends in there that are like just getting ready for war.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing stuff on it all morning. It's crazy.
Yeah, he said he was like FaceTiming one of them, and he just had all his guns lined up, ready to go.
Damn. All right, well, I just was curious. I'll let them get into this.
So I had gotten to this. The reason why I'm asking if you can help me is I kind of want to keep how I did my classes the same, just so I can kind of look back on it. So I added new user. I just added this from your Slack right now, but I'm not even getting that new fill box that you had.
Okay, so in you're probably not rendering it in your app.js. And so there's a question. We're coming back at 12:30. Okay, so yeah, so in your app, go to where you're rendering. Yeah, see, I can see line 5, you're importing it, but you're not using it. So scroll down. And yes, somewhere you just want to actually render it. So maybe after line, 49, you could go in and render that component.
And what did you have? It has a H1 or?
It's the new user.
Oh,
It's
new
that
user.
React. It's that React component we created.
User. And then what am I putting in it?
We'll just do a self-closing tag. So let's just get it rendering. So you should say, there it is. Cool. So that's definitely not going to work because you don't have the add user function in your app.js, and then you're not also passing that down to your
So what line is that starting on?
so if you go so let's just do this. I'll just Slack it to you. So in your app.js, you need to add that function. Just kind of anywhere. Well, I mean, in
You say added in somewhere in here?
yeah, just like
Right here is fine.
yeah, right there is fine. Cool. And then you need to on line 54. Now you need to like pass that down as a prop.
So is that when you put it like this?
I think I called it like add user prop or add user CB. Capital CB
CB.
equals brackets. And
A
then
regular bracket.
curly brackets. And then the add user. So then you actually give it that function. So you're creating a prop called add user CB on your new user. It's equal to that function add user. And so then now in your new user JS file, you have props.add user CB. So that should be defined now. So then that should actually work. now.
Let me see it. in my Chrome. Okay. Oh, wait, what happens to my other users?
We haven't got them.
Oh, I haven't gotten them yet, so now they should be under it.
Yeah, but now you get.
Oh, they're above it, but I can
Yeah, but I get it. Yeah. So when you actually
now,
click,
okay.
Cool.
So now I'm caught up to where you are.
yeah,
And then now, just so I remember correctly, if I wanted to put these at the bottom again, I can change that in the. Is it in the app.js or where did you do that at? I
yeah,
remember.
it'd be in the app.js. In
And
that.
it'd be right here where you do it. Don't tell me. It'd be right here and you switch these two, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get an understanding of it. Yeah, I just liked how I kind of laid it out and did my buttons red and everything. So I just wanted to keep that.
Oh, that's fine. I think that's good.
Thank you.
Cool, no problem.
Yeah, almost like whenever I kind of add classes on it, it helps me kind of keep track of it too. Like style classes.
Okay, so let's keep going. Yeah, we have one more thing to do, and that's the update. Lots of ways to do the update. I'm just going to try to do it the simplest way I can think of. And then, as we do different CRUD examples, and we'll see there's different kind of ways we can do actually all of this kind of thing. But for now, let's just get an example up. So I think there's two tricky things with update. It's, first of all, there's a lot more ways to do it. We could like have it linked to a new page. We could have a form pop up. We could have a form drop down in our thing. And then the other thing that we want to do with a update is we want to have the form pre-populated, right? If we're updating something, I'm going to want to have a form show up with all of the values as they are in their current state. So let's just look at a demo and then we'll go from there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my new user form and I'm going to Command A and Command C. So I'm just going to copy it. And I'm going to create a new file called edit user.js. Now I'm going to say this, if you find yourself copy and pasting a file like this and changing only a couple things, that might be a suggestion that, you know, you could probably throw this into one file and share the code. But for today, we're going to just copy and paste it, and we're going to change the things we want to change and, you know, or we need to change. So there's going to
Now, one of the first things we would do is change the export default, right, to edit user.
technically it would work.
It'd still work.
It would still work, but we're not going to get to that. So yes, let's do that. Let's change that to edit user. And, you know, let's change some of our things to say like, you know, instead of add user, this should say edit user. This should say like edit user form. We're probably not going to want to do this like props.add user callback, right? So I can comment that out. But we're getting close. Really, it's because, right, I just changed those things. I changed the edit. I changed the name of the file. I changed like the header. I changed the button.
So you probably could have used like a bunch of ternaries and not had to have made a new file, right?
Yes. So, I mean, this is close. We're still not quite there, but let's just get this rendering right now. So those are the changes I made. There's one more thing where I don't want to set the initial state to an empty array, to an empty string. I want to use the actual value. But let's get this rendering. So in my app.js, actually where I want to put this form is actually going to be in my user component. This is not going to be maybe super pretty, but let's just do it. I'm not really caring about how it looks. I'm caring about how it works. So I'm going to do my user, or I've called it my edit user component, right? So each of my users are going to have their own form. And then I'll auto import that in my user component. We get my users. And so these all, well, first of all, now this is a little ugly, right? They all have these forms showing. I probably don't want to show that by default. Well, luckily I spent the time at the start to put this user UI in its own component, right? It's nice to have this in its own component. Because what I can do is now I can just come into this little component and be like, you know what? I want to be able to like toggle between seeing the user and toggle between seeing the form. So let's do that. What should we, what thing do you think I'm going to use?
This is a ternary too, right?
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a ternary.
Oh.
But what do I need?
Boolean, right?
A Boolean, yes. I need a Boolean, but how am I going to get that Boolean? Like that Boolean's
On
going to
click.
It's a click. It's going to need state, the use state hook. So I need some state. I need a Boolean. I want this Boolean state, right? So I grab my use state hook. And maybe I call this like, I don't know, show form. So if show form is true, I'm going to show the form. If it's false, I'm going to not show I'm going to show the user. use equals use state. What should be this default state of this, do you think?
False,
False. Okay, why do you say false?
because you don't automatically want that user form to pop up unless asked to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It's kind of like a subjective decision or a UX decision. I think by default, I'd rather have, you know, the user card show up, and then once they hit edit, then it should show the form. So let's add some UI for this. So, you know, actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a render user function that really just returns what maybe I have inside of here. Maybe I can leave that button there, but it just returns that user information. Oh man, now this is all nested. This is all sibling. I'm getting this error. Maybe I don't want to wrap this in a div, but I want to get rid of this error. I could just wrap this in a JSX fragment. And you know what, sure, let's throw the button in here as well, just to keep it clean. So now I can say render user, I can call that function and edit user. This really
Wait,
shouldn't.
Did you just change the return? What did you do right there? Because I was typing render user and starting that function, and then I didn't see what happened after that.
I essentially just took what was inside of my JSX, like in the return, like it was like that. And I go, I just want to abstract this into its own function. So I have a render user function that is just returning that, but I needed to wrap it in a fragment because I can't have sibling elements. There has to be one kind of root level JSX element. So now, and then here I just rendered user. And the reason I'm doing this, it's going to make it easier to like do like a ternary or like some logic. So my UI should look the same right now. I'm showing my user and I'm showing my form. Cool. So now maybe I could do like a button. So what I'm going to have this button, I'm going to use this show form Boolean. So if show form is true, maybe I'll have it say cancel, because that would be like editing. If it's false, I can say like edit. And this button, I can do an on click handler to set show form, just the opposite of what it is. To show form. And that will just toggle that Boolean, which all for now should just be toggling the text of the button. But I can go test it.
So initially, what is the button going to say?
So let's look at it. Let's look, even before we look at the browser. So my show form is false by default, because that's the initial state. So if false, so that should be false, question mark. So what is it going to say?
So it'd be cancel, or no, it'd be edit.
Yeah, it'd be edit.
And then whenever you click on it, it can change to cancel.
Yeah. So I can get my users. So now it's going to say edit, cancel, edit, cancel, edit, cancel. And now I can just, toggle these. So I can say like show form. So if show form, I'll just kind of do this with like a short circuit evaluation. I actually could probably use, I could probably just do a ternary here. Let's do a ternary. So if show form is true, I will edit user. If not, I'll call that render user function.
And what is the render user function doing again?
The render user function just returns this JSX.
Whenever you type it in.
Yeah. So now like this is that's my render user function. It's returning this JSX. But now when I click edit, it shows my form. And then I can click cancel. So there's one other thing though, and that is I want my fields to be populated with the values.
That's the values of the names and email
Yeah.
and everything that's initially there.
Yeah, once again, that'd be pretty bad UX, right? If you're editing something and the default values weren't there,
Goes to blank, yeah.
yeah, that'd be horrible. So I need to pass these down. How do I do that? Starts with a P.
Props.
Props. Yeah, so I need to give this edit user props. Let's just start with email. So I could say email. Well, that's going to be props.email. Right? Because we're getting this component gets passed. So this is where it gets a little like inception-y again. So in my app.js, I'm rendering my users. I do a user.map where I pass down all this stuff to my user component. So I'm giving like email, first name, last name, etc. right here via props. So then in my user component, I have props.email. Well, now I want to pass that down to my edit user as a prop. I'll also call it email. And the value is going to be props.email.
So what you just did is put the value of that email in the edit box.
No, it's not in the edit box.
Well, not in the edit box, but whenever you open the edit box in the email form edit.
Nope, because it's not there. I still haven't done that part. I'm passing, what I'm doing is I'm passing edit user this prop called email, and the value is props.email, which I'm actually getting from which, you know, when I create my users in my app.js. So it goes from app to users to my form. And let's just do on our form, let's do like a pink. Right, so my user state has to go through my app, because notice the pink is in my user. It has to go through the app, through the user to the form. It's still not there because in my edit user, like my initial state is still an empty string, right? Well, how do I get that email prop? Well, it's prop.email. There we go. Now they're getting their email prop.
So go back again to where you just added that. So now, if I'm not wrong, for the first name, you would go back down to where you put the prop.email.
Yes, right here.
And then you would somehow add the first name, the props dot first name underscore first name.
Let's do it like this. Just
Props dot first underscore name, and then you would go back up to where you just added that and add X this time.
yes. So this, if I called this X, then in my edit user, this would be props dot X.
And then that would be all the first name.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. I could also, a little inception here, if I'm lazy and I don't want to write all this out, I could just pass this all of the props that was given to the user. So this is going to take the props given to the user. And we're also, because we're logging these props, let me just show you what those are. It's the avatar, it's that function, it's the email, it's the first name, ID, last name. I could just take all of those props that's passed here, pass them down to the edit user function. And now if I refresh, get users and click edit, I have the email, but I don't have the first name because, well, now I didn't call it X. It has to be what it matched, what it actually is. That's the first name.
Oh, by doing that, you just saved yourself a little time and effort.
Yeah, it's just typing. And, you know, it makes your code cleaner. This can, like, when you have a whole bunch of props, it can make your code a little messy, but
And you're doing that through edit users and user right now? Which two tabs are you going back and forth on?
my user and my edit user.
Edit user, okay.
But yeah, I can just come in here. Last name. Props dot. This was avatar, right? Cool. So now when I refresh, get my users, click edit, I now have all my values there to go.
Can you show us the two files again real quick? I'm just trying to catch up.
Let me just slack out this part because these are the two main changes. It's going to be this in your state. So those are like your setup of all your state. And then in your user, that's the return. That's what goes in your return. It's really just, yeah, I mean, this was really what we added. Actually, let me just slack out the whole user file. So that's probably easier. So yeah, once like I was talking about earlier with functions, you know, it's like it gets confusing once you start like this inception, this nesting. I mean, this is not really a function, but you know, we see something similar with passing props. It's like we have props up here. We got to pass them through our app, through the user, and then to the user form. And then when we click, so let's now do our edit. So let's just do so I'm in my app.js. I'm going to do a update user function. And for now, all I want to be able to do, my goal is to log the ID of the thing that was clicked. In app.js, ID is ID. Okay. So I'm in my app.js. I need this update user function to get to my edit user form. Where do I first need to pass this to? Because I don't, if I like look for user form, or what it was, edit user, I don't have that component in here. You know, with my add, with my new user, I just passed it like this. I gave it a prop and I passed it the function. But how do I get this to my user form, my edit user form? How did I get my user data to my edit user form?
Say that one more time, sorry.
how did I get my user data to my user edit form?
Props.
You changed it in the use states, right?
Yeah, no, I heard the word props. Props. I need to pass it down via props. So I need to pass, because I'm passing down the state here. So what I need to do is I need to pass this update user function via props to my user. Update user. So now my user component, each user component is getting a update user prop, which is this function right here. Notice the color. Blue is the prop name, white is the value. So my user now has a prop dot, I already forgot the name. Prop dot update user. You want to know a quick little trick with VS Code? If you hover over the component and do a command click on that component, it will take you to that file. Pretty cool.
So what did you add in it again? It was in the render user section. You added the update user and then update user.
Yeah. Right there. So I'm passing this prop to my users. Now I want to pass that to my edit user form. I'm just going to call this X for now. Props. Well, actually, it's actually getting passed down right here. You guys shouldn't do that. That's kind of showing what it's kind of like a trick, but this is actually going to be passing that prop down to my edit user, right? Let's go to my edit user function and do a props dot edit user right here. I just want to log the ID right now. See if this works. I'm going to clear my console just so it's easier to see. Edit user blows up. Props.edit user is not a function.
I think you didn't use the caps.
Did I use a caps? Oh, it's update user. The name is update user. So I give all of these props to my user, but all of the props I gave to the user, I'm also going to give to my edit user component. But I didn't call it edit user, I called it update user. Should really call that update. Well, I guess that's fine. Update users. But now if I change that name right, in app.js ID is 1. In app.js ID is 3.
And that should happen when you click the edit button.
Magic, right? It's not really magic.
Well, no, I'm just trying to see where mine's not logging anything, so I'm just trying to see.
So I have this function. I have a function that just takes an ID and logs it. It's called update user. Let's do this. Let's change this name right here to X. So now I have an X prop that I'm passing to my user. In my edit user, I spread out over all the props that were given to this user component. So what would I need to change here this to? X. Get users. Edit. And add user And that's working. X is a bad name, so I'm going to switch that back. So Command P. So Command P is going to start coming in useful now that we're having a lot of files. So Command P in VS Code lets you search for a file. I'm going to switch that back to update user, and my app.js, this becomes update user. All right, we're kind of running out of time, but let's let's just do this. So instead of logging, now that I have the ID, let's not, we don't, for this, we don't want to just log the ID. We want to log the whole object, right? So I want to grab my ID. I want to grab the email. Well, the email is just going to be from my state. Those are the same, so I don't need to have those there. So for my ID, when I use my new form, I created a random one. But for my update, I'm just going to keep the ID the same. I don't want them to update the ID. I can change the first name. Those would be the same key. The last name. Those are not the same key, so I have to actually change that. And avatar is going to be foo. Or actually, we had this right here. I should have just done this right here. Call this updated user. Since we had all of that worked out for us right here, we can just change a couple of these things. The only thing we really need to change, instead of using the math.random, I just want to use the ID. Just want to keep the ID the same. Cool. I'm going to get rid of these logs too. So really, yeah, I mean, I just changed the name of this so it makes more sense. And then the math.random. So now when I go to edit, just add a bang, add a bang, add a bang, just see if all these are changing. Edit user. In app.js, now I'm logging what I'm calling ID, but that is now the object. It has the ID, has the first name, last name, avatar with those values updated. Cool. So this really isn't an ID. Like, it works, but that's a bad name. I should call that. That's really just a user. Okay. So now we get back to kind of like your homework yesterday. I want to, so now I have a user. I want to update users, you know, with this user updated, right? So I want to update all of my user state just to update the thing I just updated. What function do I use for that? Map. So I do my users.map. Go through each user. If so this is, it's a little different than what you did in your homework, but it's just if the user.id or the u.id equals, if it equals the user that was passed to me ID, I want to return that user because that's the one that I'm getting passed. That has all the values from my form. If those IDs don't match, just don't change it. So return you.
So this, what we just did is just keeping the same ID rather than giving it a new one.
What do you mean? So I keep the same ID right here. Back in my edit user form, where I'm sending this updated user, yes, I'm keeping the ID the same. That's very important to like, I don't want to change that. You're never
Okay.
going to want to change the ID on the front end.
Right. So what did we just do then? Because I thought that's what it was. Like I thought that was more of just keeping the ID the same.
So back to my edit user, these are the values from my form. So I'm going to call that updated user function and pass it that updated user with the value, like from the values of the form. So then in my app.js, when I actually call this function, this user param, that's going to be the updated, that's going to have all the updated values. So from that one user, so what I do is I go through all of my user state and I say, hey, does the user state in my user array, does it equal the ID from that thing from my form? If it does, return that user form data. If it doesn't, don't change it. And then I can go ahead and set users to be the updated users. This. Let's just say user is. So we have that log right there. So I'm going to go edit. So I can come in, I'm going to change Emma, her name, and last name. So I'm editing multiple things now. You know, with our to-do list and other stuff, we were just editing like one thing, but now we have the ability to like edit everything. So I click edit user. I'm going to hit cancel to show the form. And now that state's been updated for that user. And I could look down here, wherever Emma is in my state, she's been updated.
Okay.
Can you go back to your code for a sec?
Yeah, and actually I'm gonna push this up.
Where's the updated users? Where did that come from?
I stored this users.map. I'm storing that to a variable. I'm also gonna push this right now, so don't forget. So this is like our full CRUD. And this is your first time with, you know, doing the CRUD actions on, you know, on something more than just like a to-do list and toggling a to-do. So this is a full-on like front-end React CRUD demo. So so just to review what CRUD is, we can get our users, we can delete a user, we can add a user, and we can update a user. Now, this is not the best UI that I have to hit edit and then I have to cancel my form. We'll maybe look at that. Well, can we do that right here? No, we won't do that now. We'll just have that be a bad UI right now. But it's working. Definitely, I know this is, I think this is very first couple times you start doing this, it's challenging. I think one of the most challenging things about it is our state is living at like this in our app.js, but then we have like an edit form that's living like nested in the user form, you know, that's nested in our app. And, you know, that's where the event is happening. And then we have to like propagate that event back up to our app.js. But it really, it's a good demo because, or a good thing to like wrap your head around, because it really forces you to kind of understand props and state in React. Because that's how we're mainly doing this. And like with everything, you know, like I think another confusing part is that like all of a sudden we're sending props that are functions, just more and more functions, right? There's something about functions that are just like, for some reason it like it's more confusing than like a string. Like we can understand passing a prop down if it's a string, but when we pass down a function as a prop, it's like, wait, what? It just kind of is a little more mind bending. Because this update user function is defined in my app.js, but I call it right here, like all the way down in my edit user after this button in my form is clicked. That is like my handle submit function. So. But this will be your homework today, is to go through this, to do CRUD actions. So if you've started on yesterday doing this, you'll have today to work on this. And yeah, any questions?
So for our homework, we're gonna redo it and get up to here.
Yeah. So like full CRUD actions on this user list.
But on the one that we started yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So I don't know how far you got, but yeah, definitely. So you'll do the create and update, because we didn't talk about those yesterday. Cool. Well, that's it for me. Sorry, I'd like to be done by 1. So sorry, we've been kind of sometimes even before 1, but sometimes even like 12:30, but we've been going, it's usually a little longer the first couple of weeks, but we won't go so long in the future. Cool, let's take lunch. Let's come back at 2:10.
All right.
Sounds
Thanks.
good.
Right.
See.
See ya.